You actually are live streaming as well. Yeah, hi. Yeah.
Scotchy.
Gosh. So anyway, that was the second time I woke up and I was covered in peanut butter.
Yeah. Well, you know, you win some, you lose some,
Yeah.
right? On the it's Ocean's 11. I don't know if you've seen those movies, but Brad Pitt and George Clooney,
Yeah.
two traditionally quite serious actors. They're really funny, and every time they start off a scene, that's at the end of some random conversation.
Yeah.
Like, so what did you do? Oh, I apologize and put the towel back on. That sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's
That's
like,
like, well, could you do? Like, I
yeah,
apologize.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's so funny. They're always like halfway through a conversation with some funny last line. Anyway, man. Yeah, so we're live and recording, so that's good. It looks like you're all recording on your end.
Yeah.
Rock and roll, man. We're live streaming for the no one who's watching, so that's all good.
Right, love it.
Yeah, well, we knew this is our second Tuesday session, so we've been doing the Thursday 11 a.m. for about a year,
Yeah.
and this is our second one on a Tuesday. So
Yeah.
the live stream is fun, just a bonus. But yeah, man, rock and roll. Should we get into it?
Right, let's rip in.
Awesome,
Let's go.
Hugh, man. Goodness gracious me, just gotta keep that there for. That's my only thing. I don't have a phone holder because I have my phone there to make sure that if I'm having any messages from Christian, the producer, I can see
Yeah.
them. But I don't have a phone holder. These little things, but that's okay.
Here's the little thing.
Welcome back to the Coaches to the Moon podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Very excited to have a good friend of mine, a man I've actually met in person multiple times, Mr. Hugh Hall, with us today. So Hugh is the founder of Inflow, a company we'll learn a lot about today, but basically they're helping with a massive range of things to make your sales better in your coaching business, from complete done for you outsource sales to optimizing your sales funnel to their signature catapult program, which you can plug in and play if you want to crush out some more sales in the next year. So, Mr. Hugh Hall, thanks for hopping on. It's a public holiday. How are you, mate?
Well, I'm good. I'm good. And that is a killer intro. Like, that is better than anything I could have done. So
Good.
that is, like,
Well,
that's
you know what? Right. So, my podcasting style has evolved from two things. One, there's a show called Hot Ones on the internet. Have you ever seen that, where the celebrities eat the wings?
With wings, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Sean Evans is such a great interviewer because he just knows things about people,
Yeah.
and makes them feel like they're sort of taken care of, right? So I always thought that was so cool. You see people's eyes light up when he knows something about them.
Yeah.
And then the other one was, I used to hop on podcasts and they'd be like, Alex, tell me about yourself. I'm like, that's what you just give me something, bro. Like, so
People are so bad at it as well. They're like,
yeah.
I don't know. What do you want me to say? It's like, something.
Yeah, I mean, thank goodness, like, I was able to come up with good answers to those questions. But I always just thought that was such a lazy way of interviewing. I've really made an effort. So thank you for acknowledging that I've done a good intro for you. I'll do my best.
That was a ripper. Loved it.
So, mate, we met when I ran a cafe in Brookvale, and you were a patron at my cafe at the company you were working at. So since then, we've both done a lot of stuff, had a lot of changes, I suppose. So yourself, you were working at a big company called, well, we can or can't name it. You were working at a big company with a friend of ours.
Yep.
And then you worked at another company, and now you are doing your own business. Can you just walk us through what you were doing then, what you went and did in between over the sort of lockdown years, and then how it inevitably led you to start your own business in the last few months?
Well, I'd love to. So, just thinking back, so we originally started chatting in 2019. Like, we went to the what was it? It was like,
oh yeah, we went to a Success Resources event, didn't we?
Exactly.
We went to
Like,
Gary V and Grant Cardone.
growth conference or the agency or whatever it was. 2019. It was absolute belter of event. Like, that was just before, like, that was the August before COVID. And there were some rock stars at that event. Like, it was just awesome, right? So we all went there and just frothed. Like, we just sat there, like, learning all this real cool stuff. And then we move into, like, the end of the year and kind of in 2020, and COVID shows up, right? And COVID shows up and it's just like merciless. So at that time I was working for working for this local fella on the beaches, and like he got massively walloped with COVID as well. Like he's like big business, but still like not in a position where he's going to be unaffected. And one of the really harsh things about it was just like I can't keep my overheads. Like I can't have like this many staff. And I was like last one in. So I was like the last one in, first one out. So he gave me a call one day, and he's like, look, basically everything's kind of gone south. We're gonna have to we're gonna make you redundant. And I was like, man, this is the worst possible timing. Like I've got a kid due like next month. Like this is like the worst thing ever. And he's like, yeah, look, we've looked at it, we can't figure it out. Like it's awful situation, but it is what it is. I'm like, okay, cool. So then we move into that, and it's just like craziness, like that March 2020 to like June 2020 of just like pure hectic COVID. Like everyone was kind of running around, no one really knew what to do, and like it was all a bit of anything. Anyway, we have our what number is Kit? Kit is number 4. So we have our 4th kid, our 4th baby, and I'm like, I got to do something. Like I can't just be unemployed. Like it just doesn't work. Like I've got 4 kids. Like it's just me working. Like I got to go and figure something out. So I go, all right. Well, what if I'm just a salesman? Like what if I'm just a salesman for hire? So I started a company then. It was just me doing some contract and sales work as like the everyday BDM. And it was awesome. Like it worked really, really well. It was super flexible, and lots of people really enjoyed it because it was like pick up, put down, like professional BDM without having to go through like hiring and training and all this jazz. And then that kind of like ticks along for a little bit, and it's plugged our like income gap quite nicely. So like, oh, this is okay. And then end up getting scooped up by the Entourage Education Group, and they were like, hey, can you come and do some sales for us? And was with them for a few years, and then realized that actually I really loved what I was doing from that sales perspective, and then rebranded, revamped, and then put some extra services in there, and a little while down the track, here we are with Inflow, which is like the 2.0 version.
Yeah, I didn't know about the that you were contracting in the middle there. That's awesome. That always sounds like such a fun, albeit insecure job. But if you're good at it, you're going to be set for life.
Yeah.
And done, just being a good salesperson.
Yeah.
You mentioned a lot of stress in there. Obviously, got five kids living in the house for your partner, and that's super just, I can't believe that anyone having that amount of kids having 2, we're like, what would you do with another one? There's only 2 of us. Like, this makes sense. You're outnumbered almost 3 to 1. So
1 to 2 is you basically double down, and then you're like outnumbered. Like 2 to 3, you're like, yeah, it's okay. And then like 3 plus, it's kind of like whatever. Did they have you fed and watered them today? Like yes or no?
Got it.
Yeah, okay, they're still alive. Good, you've done a good job.
More of the same, yeah.
But I'll give you an example. It was like how do you know you're working from home without saying you're working from home, right? Like I picked, like this was on the camera stand, like they just shoved it in there. Right? So,
Love that. Yeah, well, this is my notebook here, which has just got like anyone who's watching, the scribbles all over my my notebook.
I'm gonna help Dad work. Here we go.
Or they'll come in and be like, "Daddy, draw a shark," and that's the only thing I can draw. I can draw sharks. So yeah, man. Well, I do appreciate it, and I love to talk to parents on this show, because I think the combination of parent and business owner is a funny one, because on the one hand, it gives you immense flexibility that if you need to drop work that day and go and pick up your kids from school, or your kid's sick, you can do that. But on the other hand, in doing that, if you don't have your business set up properly, that just means you don't get paid that day. Yeah. So it's a really interesting double-edged sword, where in the startup years, it can be extraordinarily stressful before you get a business set up that can kind of run without you.
Yeah.
What I loved, and I've mentioned this quote to a lot of people, was you saying, I was like, dude, how on earth did you quit a job with 5 kids to start a business? That's mental. And you said, my wife and I sat down, we said, we're stressed anyway because life is stressful. We may as well be stressed for our own business.
Yeah.
We may as well be stressed for our own dreams.
Yeah.
I thought that was super duper cool. You mentioned on your website you're a third generation entrepreneur. So, how do you think those role models in business led you to have that sort of mindset and this sort of affinity to take risks?
Oh, that's such a good question. Uh, so I suppose I got the bug from Dad and Grampy. Like they've both run their own businesses and then done their own things, and then they decided to start a business together, which was hilarious.
And what did they do? Sorry.
So they were nurserymen. So the long and short of it was Grampy was in the SAS, came back from the war, and was just like, yeah, no, I've seen some stuff. Like I'm just gonna have a quiet life. So his version of a quiet life was like, hey, I'm gonna start a business. So he just goes and buys a field, and then he's like, cool, I'm gonna now plant some stuff in this field, and then I'm going to put some greenhouses up, and then I'm going to put a shack, and then he just kept chipping away at it, and before he realised it, he had a garden centre. So he grew roses, like that was like his specialty, like that's what he did. And he created a genus that he named after Granny. It was called the Judy, because her name was Judith. So he specifically bred this like very obscure rose just for her, which I thought was beautiful. Considering like Granny was nice, but she was a bit of a battler, so we're like, oh, that's pretty. It takes a big man to do that. And he ran that business for a long time, and then he gave Dad and Uncle James their kind of like first leg up. So Dad used to work in London for, I think it was for a publishing company for a long time, and then one day Grampy decided to take a detour on the way home from fishing, like the big fishermen, so they absolutely loved it. It's how they decompressed. Like I love doing it. Like, it's a great way just to kind of get out, get in the sun, and just kind of zone out and just be with your thoughts and just kind of relax a little bit. Anyway, so long story short, Grampy comes back from fishing one day, takes a detour, goes through this random town. Like honestly, it's just nowhere. Goes through this random town called Froome, finds like an empty lot. And for some reason, he's like, I'm going to buy that. Literally walks in, goes and talks to the fellow who owns the lot, buys it, doesn't say anything, then goes home. And then Dad and Uncle James were young men at this point. And he goes, boys, great news. You're now in the garden centre business. I've bought you a plot of land. Go and do it. And they're like, all right, okay. Where are we doing that? And they're like, Froome. And they're like, we've never heard of Froome. And they just went. They just went off and just made what they did of it, and they had that garden centre for like 25 years. Like, they've been running that ever since, and then they sold the business, took a golden parachute, and been retired ever since. So like I've always had that bug. Dad's always a big one for taking risks. Like he's a bit of like he's an awesome human being, but he's just a bit of a rogue unit. Like he doesn't really think about stuff. He's just like, oh yeah, no, we'll do that, and then goes and does it, and then he's like, oh, yeah, it didn't quite work out the way I thought it was going to. And we're like, yeah, no worries. Did you think about it? It's like, not really. No, I just kind of thought I should do it, and I went and did it. So I kind of got a bit of that. So I'm like, oh, let's go over here and try this and see how we go. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. When it doesn't work, Jen reminds me that it hasn't worked several times, just to make sure I don't repeat the mistake, which is hilarious. And yeah, it's just, just grew up in that environment. Like we just always, like there was always something to do, or there was always something to work on, or there was always like a project or an idea, or that we went and did. And like Dad was always super supportive of us being like really creative and just like going out and figuring stuff out. So like he never ever gave us the answer to anything. He was like, go and learn how to do it. Like go and figure it out on the hop. Whereas Mum was just like, here's the answer. Like just don't tell Dad I told you, but here's the answer. And I'm just super similar to Dad, so I'm just wired that way. Like I just go and figure stuff out and then put it together, and it's like, cool, we made this thing, let's go. And one of the things about it, like, is that there's always risk, right? There's always things that happen that you just can't control. The one thing you can control is obviously how you react to that stress. Like you can't get rid of stress; like it's always there. It's always kicking about. There's always something that is going to stress you out. It's like, I suppose the measure of somebody who's like effective is like, how do you meet that stress and manage that stress in like a really constructive way? Because otherwise it can just chew you up. You know, like, don't get me wrong, like trying to run, build, and operate a company at home full time with all the kids, like it's full on. Like it's relentless. And there's lots of days where it's just like, what am I doing? And then there are other days where like, this is amazing. This is the best thing ever. Like I'm really glad I did it. And it does, chop and change between those two things, and it's stressful. But we just got to work out, like, for me, it's always like how to manage that like really well, so that when I go upstairs at the end of the day, like, I go upstairs at the end of the day, I'm not kind of like mumbling and grumbling to myself, like being a really grumpy old man. I come up and I'm like, I'm bouncy and I'm fun, and then I rev the kids up to then give them back to Jen, because then I've got to go and do more calls, like right at bedtime. That's my favourite thing to do. Yeah, man, I think it's just like, I'm really grateful to the environment that I grew up with, and with Dad and Grandpa, and like how they looked at just going for it, like just taking the risk and giving it a red hot go, and then just kind of figuring out on the hop. Like they're very much old school generation of business owners who are like, I don't have a clue, I don't have a plan, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm just going to go and do it. And then they very much just kind of stayed in the, I'm just going to do it. And they were always still really entrenched in their business, but they just loved it. So it was never an issue for them. They never thought about like a bigger picture than that, which is fine, because they just didn't want it. I mean, I like to think that I have a really good appreciation for doing, but also kind of want to think about like the next thing, like what's the 2.0 version of this. Like I'd be pretty cranky with my future self if like things don't really change for the next 15 years and I'm still kind of in the business to the extent that I am now, because it means in my mind that I haven't really progressed, or like haven't really changed like how I'm operating, or like my capabilities as a business owner either. But yeah, man, like I got it from Dad and Grandpa, and we were just kind of raised in that environment, which was just like, if you see something that you want to go and do and it hasn't got a clear pathway, then just go for it, figure out the pathway and just build it as you go. So long as you can do that in a sustainable way that doesn't just cook you, then 100% just like go for it.
Yeah, well, thank you for the story, by the way. Love that. Sometimes I think like, how simple would it be just to grow roses? Like imagine you buy a rose, you buy some seeds, you water them, you plant the roses, you sell the roses. That's your business model. Like the cafe business model was so much more simple than what I'm doing now. But the growth thing's very interesting. Like that kind of that sort of stagnation feeling we get because we're entrepreneurial that you probably wouldn't get. I get a little jealous sometimes of people who are super happy to have a job, work that job, stay at the same level, have their footy team on the weekends, they clock off in the evenings, thoughts on family and home and TV and stuff. That sounds mega easy, but I'm sure they have their problems in their life as well, and I'm glad that I've got what I've got. Yeah. So on the growth thing, that's interesting, that the business you're running now is great, but if in 15 years time you were still in this spot, you feel a little, like you've kind of almost cheated yourself a little bit. That happened to me the other day as well. Like I have those nights, we all get into, overthinking numbers some nights, and you get into financial stress for no reason. And you think like, one way I can fix that is I go, we could literally just live on what we've got now. If I kept my same salary, my wife kept her same salary, and we kept the business at the same level, that'd be fine forever. Yeah. And it would be fine forever. But we'd never have anything more. And then the mindset comes in of like, we did a massive week last week, sales team. Yeah. Why haven't we done it again this week?
It's like, why aren't you doing it again?
Yeah. And I said that to my one of my mentors who's got like a multi-million-dollar a month business. And he's like, welcome to momentum, bro. You're in it now, and you get addicted to it, the momentum. So long story short, moving backwards, I digress. Business growth. Another quote that I got from a man called Hugh Hall the other day, which is a very interesting one. He said to me, don't let your business growth be slowed down by your sales performance.
Yeah.
So as before we dig into sales, because that's what you're here for,
Yeah.
that sounds like quite an oxymoronic statement. It sounds a little bit, not moronic, oxymoronic for the people out there. Potentially doesn't make much sense. How can you grow your business without more money coming in? So when you said that, how else can you see people growing their business in a way that doesn't include increasing revenue?
So revenue, so in my mind, revenue is a lag measurement. Or let's be super specific, like revenue growth is a lag measurement because you forget the stuff that needs to come into place before that revenue appears, right? Or before you're ready to collect it. And we often find it's like the business's ability to grow shouldn't be beholden on a single sales resource. So what I mean by that is like for a small business, like, and this is why it speaks really about coaching, right? Normally you have a pendulum where you've got like sales and coaching, and you just kind of oscillate between the two. So it's like if you have like, and you have this revenue cycle, it's like up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, because it's like you're selling and then you're delivering. And it means that the business's performance, like the business's growth and trajectory, is very much reliant on like that individual's ability to perform, right? And if you have a bad day, then you can't have a bad month, or you have a bad week, right? And the business's growth suffers. So there's that one thing. The other thing is that we forget that there are things that we have to have in place that allow us to collect that revenue the right way, in an efficient way, and also in a very scalable way. You know, a very basic example of that is like sales process. And we need to make sure that we have like a decent sales process that, you know, it doesn't need to be, you know, it needs to be relevant for the stage that that business is in. And nothing is worse than like trying to over-optimize a fairly basic sales process because we think the latest chat GPT widget or the latest like automation is going to somehow increase revenue by like $100,000, right? That's not it. It's making sure that we have the right frameworks in place so that we can do it in a very consistent way, but then we can attach like more resources to that consistency, because that's like how you compound it out. Instead of just like one person doing $100,000, you've got two people doing it, and then we've got three people doing it, and then we've got four people doing it. And before we realize it, what was $100,000 month based off of one process is now a $400,000 month because we've just allocated resource to it. So it's one of those things. It's like people that go and chase revenue. They're like, it'd be okay if I just got more money through the door. And it's like, yeah, that's partially true, but like if you do that, you're just going to be forever in this holding pattern, or you're just going to go round and round and merry-go-round, right? So we forget that the revenue is a measurement of how effective you are with those front end things, right? So your marketing, like your messaging, like how you're engaging with your audience, like how well you convert that engagement into genuine interest into what it is that you do, and that stuff comes first, right? The revenue is then just, oh, we did pretty well at that particular thing at this given moment in time. So it's like it's a funny thing, you know, but it is very much like there's a lag measurement, you know, when it comes in. And the other thing that, you know, a lot of people find not challenging, but it's kind of like, oh yeah, I kind of see what that is that when you look at the money's not necessarily the reason that we do what we do, but it very much is the fuel. Like it's the fuel to the oven, right? It's fuel to the engine. So if we can find a way of like predictably tapping into a regular stream of it, then it's going to allow us to grow in a way more sustainable way, in a way more controlled way, rather than just having it reliant on like how many hours that you've slept that night, or like whether or not you've had 2 cups of coffee versus 1, or like whether or not the kids have decided to be sick that day. Right? So it's very much about like just making sure that we don't lose sight of what's important. And one of the hardest things to do in sales, or just I suppose actually I'll just put it into sales for now. I think it does compound out into a broader conversation around like growing a company, but like the hardest thing for any salesperson to do is to separate themselves from the result. And that's when you know you've got a great salesperson versus a good salesperson. Because a good salesperson will go through the motions, will say the right things, and will just kind of do what it takes to get the person on because they're chasing the money. Whereas a great salesperson understands that the money is a byproduct of the process. Like if we just follow the process and we just follow the next step of that process and we guide somebody through it the right way, the result's going to look after itself. And we just let it take care of itself. It's just like just trusting in the process. Like it's just trusting in the fact that we do the right things in the right order at the right time with the right people, and we can orchestrate an environment that promotes that. Then that's when you're going to get just like really awesome results, rather than just focusing on like, I just need to get the money in, I just need to get the sale, like I just need to convert this person, I just need that. Like very much moving into not a high, no, I wouldn't say higher self, but it's just like moving into that next level. Like when you look at it,
it's moving from short-term thinking to long-term thinking,
100%.
and I think that, you know, when we all start our first business, we all think of ourselves as entrepreneurs, but we're not really. We're just kind of like hoping to get paid that month and have a few $1,000s and kind of share our business account with our personal and just buy ourselves. Oh, I made $1,000 today. Let's go and buy, you know, a TV. That, you know,
Let's go.
Exactly. You're basically freelancing, and that's fine. You've got to get to that, like start there and then move on. But I love what you're saying, because I have noticed this in the last year, that money is a byproduct of a system and a process, and without increasing the systems and designing that process to be able to handle more money, you can't do it. And so in the coaching space especially, we all see it. You see the business coaches that just say, oh, my client made 50 grand this month, or my client made, you know, 10 grand in her first week of working with me. And it's like, okay, but what are they doing with it? And when they do this 50 grand month, can they then handle that level of delivery to then do another 50 grand month next month? Or is it like now they're so busy that they can't do any sales next month because they don't have the systems set up to do it? So that brings me to what you do, which is predictable sales processes, optimizing the way that people sell, so it's not such a flash in the pan thing, and it's not so dependent on effort and caffeine and how well the kids have slept that night. It is predictable. That's what we try to do with marketing. There will always be, you know, 2, 10, 20 new leads in your inbox every day, whether or not you're at your desk. So let's just start off with why, you know, if you can elaborate on your last answer in more of a sales direction, why you believe it's important for a business to have a predictable sales process, and what are some of the challenges you'll see in businesses who don't have one set up?
Yeah, awesome question. So, what's super common is that people just, I think a lot of service-based business, a lot of coaches kind of understand to a degree the importance of sales, but haven't actually taken it past that point. And what I mean by that is like, so let's take what you do, right? So you help make sure that there's good, consistent lead gen, like lead flow into coaches, right? Into people who look after other people, and that taps on, right? And that's continuous, right? Like we want consistency there, but what tends to happen is that the sales are still very much reliant on the founder, right? Or maybe like a junior resource looking after them. It's super common that shows up in like early stage, actually in pretty much 6 figures full stop, right? There's that sales component that is solely reliant on that person to do it. And the thing about it is, if you're oscillating between delivery and sales, then you can only really dedicate a portion of your time creating new clients. You have to then either make sure that your service delivery is 5-star, nobody leaves. Otherwise, as soon as somebody goes, you then dip a chunk of cash and you've got to move back. And you've got to move back into the sales cycle. So what I see is super common is that people do a lot of work with front-end lead gen, and then they move it into their business, and it's basically just like having a bucket with a ton of holes in it. Right? They just can't look after them properly, and then service level dips off, or it takes them like 24 hours to get back to somebody. And there's some really interesting, like in I'm pretty sure it was about 10 years ago, Harvard did a study about this, and they looked at response times based off of like initial inquiry, like when a lead came in, versus conversion rate. They were like, and we all know that the rule of thumb is that as soon as something comes in, you should hop on it and go and talk to that person, like ASAP. Like within an hour, perfect. If you can do it within 15 minutes, you are in like the top 1 percentile of players in the world to kind of get there. But what they found was super interesting was that post 24 hours of that lead coming in, like if you contacted them after that first day, then statistically the likelihood of that person converting with you goes down to like 2%. So it's huge. It's absolutely huge. So it's really funny because we've got all these people who are like, oh, I need more leads, I need more leads, I need more leads, and then they get them and then they can't look after them because they're still split across their business in too many different ways and they can't look after the lead volume in the right way. Like I was having this conversation, actually I have this conversation a lot, and that's when a well-defined sales process kicks in. Like that's where it really becomes good. Because what it does is it gives the person you're talking to, or that moves into that sales cycle, clarity on exactly where they are, and also their best next steps mapped out, so they know exactly what they need to be doing from this moment in time. They know what to expect. Like, sales is one of those things. There should be no surprises. Right? Everything should be transparent. They should know where they are. They should know what's going on. They should know what's going to happen next. They should also know what they're going to talk about with you. There's nothing worse than having just something sharp in the sales process because it dramatically derails the conversation. So we just need a way of making sure that we look after the people as they come in a really, really good, timely fashion, but we also do it in a way that that allows them to understand exactly where they are, what they're going to be doing from here. And then once we've mapped those things out and it's really clearly articulated and we've decanted a lot of the IP out of the founder's head, we can then proceduralize it. We can put some steps in place, like we can create a script, we can create a playbook, we can create some automations, we can create visibility and reporting, and then we can get somebody else to look after it. And that's when the rubber meets the road. Now, one of the most confronting things that I found is that, and I was having this chat with a fella on Friday. He's like, I convert everything. I went, yeah, cool. I would expect you to convert everything. Like, that makes tons of sense. Like, it's your business. Like, you're the consultant. You're the person who's doing the delivery. It makes tons of sense for you to convert everything you touch. I went, but that's not going to be the same forever. Like that's not a sustainable model. Like if you're going to look after every single sale and then transact every single sale and then service every single sale, you're only going to get at a certain point you plateau because it's a one-to-one input model. Like you can't leverage that. If you let go of it, your conversion rate is going to drop, but you can do it at scale, which offsets it. So that's when you have the scalability component. And he hadn't actually thought about it from that perspective. He just saw it as like, oh, well, no one's going to sell it as well as me, so why should I have somebody else do it? I went, well, because if you want to grow, then that's unfortunately going to be this next step for you. Like you are going to have to hand it off. But what sets that person up for success is understanding the things that they need to be saying, like understanding why it's important, understanding the steps to guide somebody through, and how to do that the right way, right? And how to do it with them in the center of it versus the salesperson at the center of it. So a good sales process is really just the art of like effective communication, asking good questions, being super present, and then just helping map out the best next step for that person. And sometimes that best next step is not with your company, right? Be transparent about that. Like say, hey, look, sometimes we get to this point, it's not a good fit. That's fine. Like it happens. Sometimes people like, as good as we are with our marketing or as good as we are with like how we structure everything, sometimes people show up, they just don't need us, and that's fine. Like that's going to happen. In which case, this is what we do. Are you happy with that? And they're like, yeah, cool. Then there's like, it's just having a conversation with somebody, right? So for me, like it's always super important to make sure that we have that built in, because then there's also a secondary thing there is if we have somebody who is doing the delivery, then really they should be the prize, right? Like having access to that skill set and having access to that person or that person's knowledge or like experience or guidance or whatever it is should absolutely be a prize for that person to value. So that's why the transaction component of it's so good. Like people who buy coaching, I think it's actually really detrimental to the coaching experience if the coach is in the sales process, because they already have access to that person. So it's like, why would they pay for that person if they're in the context and they can already ask some of those questions that's really bugging them? Like, no, we go through the steps, because having access to that person, that circle of genius, like, that's the product, that's the thing that you're going to pay for. So we want to remove that person from the sales process as much as we can, but so that they have something to be working towards, because we always want progression. There's nothing worse than like not progressing through a sales pipeline. Like, it's stagnant, like, it becomes boring, people drip off. Like, we always want to make sure that we've got nice momentum and we're building towards something, and we're building towards crescendo.
It's a really interesting insight that if you're paying a coach to talk to them, but then on the sales call or the process, you've already talked to them for 90 minutes over a couple of calls, then it kind of feels a bit weird to then ask for money to do the same thing next week again. That's super interesting. All right, so the sales process basically feels to me, like the way you're describing it, like a recipe that allows other people to replicate what you do, and that's what allows Gordon Ramsay or McDonald's to have restaurants all over the world, even though you don't have the founder making the burgers and the steaks. So the coaching process, as well as I know it, and this is probably something that is going to be interesting to a lot of people, because they've been raised in coaching on, you get a lead, whether that's organically or through an ad. You do a 15-minute, half-hour initial call, and then next week you do or a few days later you do like a 60-minute discovery call or a strategy session or a game plan call, and then you either sell or you're done. That's the sales process. So it's fine. It's a little bit rough and ready. It's a little bit sort of thank you next if you don't make the sale. So firstly, I would love you just to give us maybe 1 or 2 steps people could put in place to improve, firstly, their rate of people, booking and showing up for that second longer call. And then also something that they can do for people who maybe aren't ready right now. So increase the booking rate, and then make sure that a deal that's lost now isn't a deal that's lost forever.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so I'll do the first one. I'll do the booking, the show rate first. So there are 2 really simple things you can do to drive that show rate. The first one is lean in to your tech. Like, lean into your calendar software, your CRM if you have one, or anything like that. Now, what good looks like in this instance is to have 2, maybe 3 reminders tops for having somebody attend that session, right? I always like to keep it at 2, so I will do a reminder via email morning of, and then 24 hours before. So it's like, hey, just a heads up, we're going to have this session at this time tomorrow. And then tomorrow morning, they're going to get a reminder, be like, hey, we've got it booked in at 3 o'clock this afternoon. Let us know if you've got any questions. Right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is to make sure, and there's a couple of extra bits here, but it's to make sure that after that first call, or actually when we're in that first call, that you correctly position what's going to happen in that second session. Right? And you can actually repeat the framework or the plan or the agenda for that second session in that first call a couple of times. It's like, hey, so as part of this, what we're going to do is we're going to look at these things in detail, and we're going to look over here, and we're going to map this out, and then we're going to create a pathway for how you can leverage what we do here to make sure you get those results, right? And always let the person know exactly what's in order for it, and that also needs to be a bit of a price. So like, give them something to actually work towards and look forward to. Right? But when we have this conversation, it's like, hey, Alex, what we're going to do in the second session, I'll run it through with you. We're going to have a look at some of your immediate challenges. I want to get a really clear understanding of the future state, so I know where we want to go towards, what we're going to build towards. And then we'll create a personalized strategy. Like, we'll work through that together so you can see, like, what are the gaps, what we need to be working on, how we're going to do that. We're going to do that together. So straight away, we've got inherent value to that second session. Right? There's something for them to work towards, because it's like, hey, this guy's going to sit down with me for an hour and he's going to map out this stuff, and we're going to look at some really in detail areas of my business or my sales process, and he's going to help me unpack that. Like, that's amazing. Like, I don't have to pay for that either, which is great. So there's the second thing. Like, always position it so they know what they're going to get, but position it in a place where they're going to have tons of value from it, and then drive that show rate with some automation. Just remind them, because like, there's always going to be no shows. Like, you can't have 100% show rates every single meeting you have, because it's just not how it works, right? But we want to make sure that at least 50% are getting there. Right? 1 out of 2 need to be showing, and that just counts for, you know, like life. Like, something's happened in the business we can't control. Like, someone's off sick, I've got to cover, or I've got to do something, or, you know, the kids need me, or, you know, what happened the other day with Jen? Like, Jen did the weirdest thing ever in typical mum fashion, when she was making the kids something for breakfast, pulled a container off the top of the shelves, and the corner hit her on the temple, and she gave herself a concussion. Like, I was offline for the rest of the day, so I was like, hey, I've got to cancel all my meetings because I've got to go do this. Like, stuff happens, right? We just need to be aware of that. Come here, good girl. Sorry, the dog is now getting antsy because I've taken that chair. So that's the first thing. So that will help drive that show rate. Make sure you're really clear around what's in store for them. Remember, they're always going to think about, like, what's in it for me. Prize that session, give them something to work towards, something they're really eager to get into, and then lean into the tech to automate reminders so that it's just front of mind, so they just don't forget it. That's the second thing. Tips to, like, some thoughts on how to re-engage somebody who's just not ready now. One of the things that happens is sometimes we take a no as a personal thing. Sometimes somebody says, no, I don't want to do business with you, and we're like, oh, okay, well, that's kind of like, it's a bit of a thing. It's just like, it's not a personal thing, it's just the timing could be wrong. It could literally just be like, there's other things in their world that they haven't told you about, that they just can't commit to it. So it's always making sure that you leave that conversation in the best possible place for that person, right? Just making sure that they have a really great exit out of your sales process, and we also follow up with something that everyone's happy with. So instead of me just saying, that's fine, Alex, okay, how about I'll just call you in 3 months? It's like, yeah, no. Like that, even if they pick up the phone, right, it's not gonna, like, be a great conversation. But it's like, yeah, cool, that's absolutely fine. Right, timing's an issue, this doesn't make sense now, I completely get it. How about we do this? Like, I'll keep you in the loop with what we're going on. We've got some sequencing that I can pop you into. It's just gonna kind of tell you about some of the stuff that we're up to, or add some value to what you're to what you're working on as well, because we specifically look after people in your spot. And then I'll get the team just to give you a little general reach out. 3 months time, we'll reorganize another discovery session, another front call, just map out a couple of things and see if it's worth revisiting them, and we'll just do it that way. Or just invite them to something that you're doing around that time. Like, events are great mechanisms for stuff like that. If someone's who's not ready to purchase, or is not ready to buy the thing that you're doing, and if you're hosting a lot of, like, podcasts, or if you're hosting, like, a lot of digital events or things like that, just invite them to it. Like, worst case scenario, they're going to say no. Best case scenario, they come along, really enjoy it, have fun, lean into the brands, get engaged, and then you can just revisit the conversation. The biggest bit of advice is, just because someone says no to you, it doesn't mean it's a personal thing. Like, it doesn't mean that unless they hate you. Unless they specifically go out of their way to tell you that, in which case you're fundamentally bugging up your sales process. But if they're like, no, it's just not good, like, we can't afford it, whatever it is, like, one of the things about objections is, in that moment in time, whether or not that objection's real, that person thinks it's real. So, you know, we have to understand that they've thought of this reason not to do it. You can disagree with it all you want, but in their mind, it's a real reason. Whether or not it's valid, different story. We can go into, like, a 2-hour conversation and deep dive into, like, how you navigate through that stuff. But, you know, they've come up with this reason for not doing it. At the same time, if it smells a little bit and you have permission to do so, or you've positioned the conversation as a trusted advisor, give it a little push to it, and then get them to really think about it, because sometimes it's just like a knee-jerk reaction, like, oh, I don't have time for this. It's like, yeah, okay, cool. Pretty common thing that shows up as part of this conversation. Let's work out if that's actually the case, or if that's just, you know, something that you think is the issue, because sometimes what we think is the problem is actually just like a symptom. It's not the actual reason. Right? problem of having no time is that we're spending too much time in delivery because we had a killer month 2 months ago and we're not consistent with our sales process. So now we have no time. So we've got no time to actually look after it and we go around that stuff. So it's making sure that they have like an awesome experience, regardless of if they become a client or not. Like, it doesn't matter. They need to have an awesome experience. They need to really like the experience, like going through it. They need to have value. If they decide that they don't want to do something with you, that's fine. That's going to happen. You can't win every single time as much as it sucks. Just make sure you leave things in the best possible way and put them into a sequence that is actually going to be beneficial to them and help you re-engage in the right way. That's different for everyone, but just think about what that's going to be for you and your individual business and then pop them into that and then reach out if it makes sense. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. Sometimes they're just like, no, actually, it was a great conversation, but it's just not for me. In which case, that's fine. Pop them over there. Maybe we can revisit it in 6-12 months' time. Maybe never, right? But we'll see. That's what retargeting's for, right? But make sure we do that and they have an awesome experience. And more often than not, when you reach back out, they'll remember you. They'll be like, yeah, cool, we had that great chat. And then off you go.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. The bookings one, clarity on what are you doing next in the next call, because that's one thing that people lose that tangibility when they say, oh, let's have a discovery session, or let's have a strategy call, 60 minutes, you and me, and that comes with exactly. And this is something I'm trying to always explain to a lot of my clients. They come in and they've created success organically with people who an audience who loves them and knows them and would love to hop on the phone call with you, Hugh. But then when it's from a cold audience and they come through an ad, and then you've rang them up and you've said, oh, let's hop on the phone for 60 minutes. It's like, why, bro? So we've got to put some tangible outcomes on that call. And then the second one, what I got most out of your sort of re-engage people or let a deal go if it's not meant to be. And something I've noticed from you and actually my sales team, some of the people who I think are the best at sales is unlike what you see in Wolf of Wall Street, unlike what you see from Grant Cardone, they just talk to people like normal people. They're just having a human conversation with somebody and seeing if the product or service fits. Whether there might be a script or a structure, it doesn't feel like there's any techniques or there's no sales kind of moves. It's just a conversation to move towards a certain outcome. So, Hugh, while I'd love to jump into a 2-hour conversation with you on objection handling,
that's a deep dive.
That's a big one. That's a biggie. But I'm really interested in your way of doing that, because it's easy to see Grant Cardone just call someone a bitch for not making the decision. You're worried about $1,000. You should be worried about $1 million. That kind of thing. It doesn't work for everyone, right? So, while I'd love to do that, mate, you're a busy man. I'm a busy man. It's a public holiday. I want you to go and get out into the sunshine, go and enjoy yourself. Take your dog, take your family and do something awesome. I've really, really enjoyed having you on the show today, mate. And back in my life after a brief hiatus.
Yeah, it was too long a pause. So I'm glad that we got back together, we're chatting, we're doing some cool stuff. And it's unbelievably thankful to be on here and be able to have this chat with you about some of the things that, just kind of how I look at it and just be a guest and part of the atmosphere. And I really enjoyed it.
Awesome, man. Well, because I'm aware that, no one really listens to the very end of a podcast. That's why I haven't really asked you to plug anything, because we're going to put the links everywhere inside of the videos and the emails going out about this one. But Inflow is the company. Hugh Hall is the genius. And this has been Coaches to the Moon. Thank you so much once again, Hugh. Anyone who's listening live, amazing. We love you for that, or be it on the recording. We're doing 2 episodes a week now, so you can't get away from us. I'll be back next week for 1 episode, and then I'm off for a week and a half. I'm going to Fiji. So thank you so much for everything. And until then, thanks for listening. Much love and peace.